It's been quite some time since we have caught up with our next guest, and I'm glad Guardsy was able to secure his services for us today. The timing, to that extent, could not be better. Jamie Watson is a pretty familiar name, I think, to local soccer fans here. Of course, played a number of places, but I think joined the United in 2014. And back then, we used to have him on from time to time. In fact, asking about some World Cup stuff as well. These days, Jamie Watson is a world-class World Cup commentator doing a lot of national stuff, and we are delighted to have him join us this afternoon via the Connecticut Water Systems Hotline. How have you been, sir?
Dan, I'm so happy to hear your voice, man. It has been a long time since we've gotten to chat, but I hope you know as much as things change and stay the same, I am still a diehard, devoted listener to the fan and big fan of you guys and the Power Trip and everybody on up to Chad Abbott all the way up at the top, man. So I'm glad, Guardsy, reached out and we can make this happen today.
We appreciate, your ongoing loyalty, and believe me, be careful what you wish for, because if the U.S. makes a run here, you might be hearing from Guardsy a couple more times, and I think everybody would love to see this, the thing endure. And, I've talked about this earlier several times, that with any of these events, whether you're talking about NCAA stuff or NBA playoffs or Stanley Cup or World Cup, the connection for casuals is so much better and deeper when the local team or your country's team is participating and is a factor, right? And I think that's the beauty of the start here. Now we're going to get to the tough part where you got to keep winning. But I think that for the casuals, the hardcores are in it. I get that. But for the casuals, I think that's what will sustain this thing a little bit in terms of interest.
Dan, I'm so glad you brought that point up. And I love the fact you're looking at the bigger picture here, because last time the World Cup was here was in 1994. 2 years later, Major League Soccer launches from that. Mm-hmm. Well, now the league's established. Major League Soccer is in its 30th season. NWSL is doing incredible. And you start to say, okay, it's not about forming new leagues. It's about growing that next generation and those fans that are on the fence. So that way, when the greatest month every 4 years ends on July 19th, July 20th, you're wanting to go check out your five-time Heartland champions, Minnesota Aurora of USLW. You're wanting to go see Minnesota United. I mean, Dan, I was just talking with our mutual friend, Andrew Yock, and talking about how the excitement from the World Cup is carried over both on the women's side, the men's side, straight to the local teams. And I think a U.S. men's national team run will just continue to amplify how cool this has been, but you can do it at a local level in your community and be a part of something that's bigger than yourself, something that's part of your community. And I really know that Minnesotans, I mean, look, I've got two boys that are Minnesotans. We'll forever be connected to the state, and we miss it every day. I know how loyal those fans are to their teams, even when it's very, very difficult to do so sometimes. And so I just hope that it translates into more fans at local soccer games on the women's side and on the men's side.
Let's talk about where we are, where the U.S. is, and then we'll get into some other World Cup stuff, too. I am fascinated to hear some of your, analysis and maybe even background you can give us on Mauricio Pochettino, the coach. We'd spent some time on his resume, I think last week or the week before, about the very earnest financial effort to say, okay, we got to get some big shots involved in this thing. We're going to get some billionaires in this thing because we want to make him an offer that he can't refuse. And in fact, we just had an update via the iHeart Sports update indicating he's already been offered. They're trying to extend his deal. So tell me about how important do you think this hire was, what this hire told you, and what he conveys, what he brings in terms of style, et cetera.
You know, this is the right question to be asking, because what about this one particular coach makes him such a good coach that he's guiding this team to, a good level of success so far. And then ultimately, U.S. Soccer want to lock him down for another 4 years, another World Cup cycle. What makes Mauricio Pochettino so special as a coach is he gives the U.S. men's national team an identity. And one of those things about the identity is this group is more unpredictable because they can play three different formations that can change throughout the course of the game, and that keeps opponents guessing. And the reality is the U.S. men's national team is not one of the top-tier teams in the world. They're 17th coming into this tournament. So as this tournament progresses, now it's whittling down from 48 to 32, and they're going to start playing teams that are massively better than them sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
And when that happens, you have to do something to be able to beat a team that's better than you. You have to be unpredictable. You have to throw them off, give them something they're not expecting. Mauricio Pochettino has done that, and he's taken this group, and I truly believe this U.S. men's national team has the ability, if they fulfill their potential, to reach the highest ceiling that the U.S. men's national team ever has in a World Cup. Lofty expectations, but I think it's realistic expectations, and especially now with the way that this group is playing at home, the sky truly is the limit for the U.S. men's national team, and I expect this group to go further than any other team has before.
So when we evaluate coaches in this country, professional coaches, we tend to simplify it. Maybe we even oversimplify it. And we say, okay, the great ones, it's either they have an ability to reach players, to deal with their egos, to get the best out of them, either by the way they communicate with them, or maybe even just the approach they take in terms of playing time, etc. Or they represent genius strategic flourishes where they can teach a certain strategy maybe better, technically speaking, than other people. What is it with him? Is it one, more the other? What have you observed? What have you heard?
Yeah, you are asking these tremendous questions because it's the right thing. What is the X factor for Mauricio Pochettino? And I truly believe he has the respect of the players in the locker room for what he's already done in his playing career, but also more importantly in his coaching career. This is a guy that's coached Messi. He's coached Neymar. Yeah. He's coached Mbappe. So there are three of the biggest names in world soccer, and he's been the coach of them. So anytime you come in there, there is a respect for what he's achieved. I also think there's a little bit of a healthy fear because there have been times where he flat out just doesn't care if Pulisic wants to take a break. Okay, that's fine, but he hasn't called him. He didn't call him in for a little while as well, and that's your star player. Mm-hmm. I think that the players know there's a healthy fear there. But I also think he's likable to the players as well too. And you know this because you've seen generations of coaches that have come through, and in the old school, I don't think a coach cared if he was your friend. He didn't want to be your friend. He didn't want to talk to you about anything other than the sport. But nowadays, with players that are 20 years old and 22, 25 years old, they want to be able to connect. They want to be able to talk with their coach and resonate with them. And I think Pochettino does that. And getting to be around him like I have in the past, I can understand. He's a likable character, but he also has this presence about him as well. He strikes that perfect balance of being relatable, but he's also got that healthy fear that I think is truly the difference as to why U.S. Soccer views him as the man not only today, but if the reports are true, going forward.
That's a great point because, again, I still think we assume that because of the way younger athletes are wired, fear-based doesn't work. But the kind of fear you're talking about is a little different, I think. To me, it's the fear of a guy who comes with unquestioned equity, right? That the guy knows what the hell he's doing at the highest levels. Therefore, I can't mess with that. I can't pretend that I can actually mess with that. And that, to me, is the kind of fear that's really based more on respect. But to say, it's almost like I don't want to disappoint this guy, and I can't really mess with him because he's brought the goods elsewhere.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, too, because whether you like it or not, that's the way that athletes are wired these days. And this is also, as a longtime regular on the Power Trip, this is also wild to me that we're 10 minutes into this conversation, and we've been talking this much sports. I don't know if Corey Cove could wrap his head around or Sauce would have walked out of the room by now for sure if we'd have been talking this deep dive into sports. And I love it with you. This is bumper to bumper at its finest here. It really is cool to see that the U.S. men's national team has been good, but also entertaining because in the past it was kind of one or the other, but it wasn't both. And I think that lost a lot of fans along the way. A lot of people just didn't gravitate towards that. And I really have enjoyed the way that this group has played. They look like they're fighting for each other. And you know how important that is because the little intangibles, when you like the group around you, you believe in the players around you, and you know that each other has their backs. When those little moments happen, when a teammate makes a mistake, if you genuinely like the guy or at least respect him and you have a good camaraderie with the group, you don't mind doing those 60 to 70-yard runs to cover for a guy's mistake. And then you're able to look at him and go, like, I got you. And you know those little things, they add up ultimately to a team doing well in the success. You have to have it. And that's something you can't fake. And I truly think this U.S. men's national team has that.
Jamie Watson, kind enough to join us. We're talking largely World Cup today. You mentioned establishing an identity. So how would you define it? Is it what you said earlier about strategically at least being able to play 2 or 3 different ways and to be versatile enough to do it? Or is there another aspect to it? Because I think one of the grievances I've heard from soccer experts forever regarding, okay, what's wrong with the U.S. World Cup team on the men's side? Can't we at least get some momentum going? And it was, well, there's no identity. They don't know what they want to be. They don't know what they are. So when you use the I word, the identity word, how does it translate to you? What do you think that means in this case?
I think what it means is knowing what your strengths are, and that's having some flexibility in the group, because there are some times you got to suffer in sports, and you're going to come against teams that are better at possession than you, and sometimes you're going to have to say, okay, that's fine, but as a group, we need to make sure that we can defend with maybe an extra defender at times, and then we have to be quicker in transitional moments when they make a mistake before that team can get set defensively. Maybe they're very difficult to break down. This is the way we need to beat the team. But then there are also some times whenever they're going to be the team that's dominant in possession, and I think it's understanding the clear goal. The one thing with Mauricio Pochettino is you've always heard the saying sometimes in sports and in teams can get in trouble when there's too many cooks in the kitchen. Well, with Mauricio Pochettino, he is the executive chef, and there is no debate about it. Yeah. Who's given the menu and the recipe for the players to cook up for some success, right? And I think that this group understands that. So when you buy into that and you're able to know what your game plan is clearly and be able to be versatile in the way that you do it, it sort of mixes it up. It gives you a way in which you can approach a matchup, because some days you're the windshield and some days you're the bug. Sometimes you're going to be the dominant team and you're going to be the one that's the driving force, and you're going to be smashing some bugs on your windshield. And when you run up against some of these top 10 teams in the world, it's going to be a little bit of the roles reversed, and you're going to have to be okay with that and figure out how to be able to survive that and just advance. Because the greatest thing about the knockout phase from this point forward, Dan, this is not a best-of series. You don't have to be better than the team on paper with the world ranking. You don't have to beat them over the course of multiple games. You just have to be better than your opponent for 90 minutes, potentially 120 minutes in penalty kicks, and it's just survive and advance at this point. And that's going to be the beauty of this World Cup, because it genuinely has been. This World Cup has been the most entertaining that I can remember, Dan, in my entire lifetime. It's been that good, and we've been treated to a wonderful show where all the stars are showing up day in and day out.
Yeah, we're going to try to get to a couple of those stars in a minute outside the U.S. team as well. The head coach was decidedly irked with the Jackals, the media Jackals, after last night's match, and in his mind, it was, wait a minute now, guys, you do know that we've already qualified as with the top team out of our group. So that leads to the inevitable that we have to talk about, the question of quote-unquote momentum. And even if we know there were a million reasons to not play people, that there's still this nagging concern that when you got it going as good as they did through the first 2 matches, that you still want to mess with that. So how did you calibrate that? How did you evaluate the decisions that were made in terms of who to play and who not to play? And is there something in our psychology that makes us, nevertheless, at the moment, maybe because the winning goal came so late, seemingly overreacting to the point where he's going like, did you think we were eliminated tonight? Because we really weren't.
And you're asking the right questions. And the greatest thing about this is right now as we sit, less than 24 hours after a loss to the Turkey game, we're talking about Pochettino. We're not talking about the players. We're not harping on the fact that Timway and Gio Reyna didn't have their best games and really let themselves down. We're talking about the coach. And maybe that was a little bit of a tactics and a mind game that we're not talking about the players. We're talking about his response. I do think that he made 9 changes coming into the lineup. I think he made all the right decisions about making sure you don't play any of the players that had a yellow card. Yep. So that was Chris Richards, Florian Balogun, Anthony Robinson, Tyler Adams. Those 4 players, if they would have picked up a yellow card in the course of yesterday's game, they would have been out for the knockout game. And then Christian Pulisic was battling an injury, but you were able to get him 30 minutes, and he was able to come through relatively unscathed at the end. So I don't have one problem with it, because the fact of the matter is the story about the 2026 World Cup for this U.S. men's national team is not going to be written about their result against Turkey. they had gotten their reward from qualifying after 2 games, that it literally did not matter how the game went yesterday, because if they won 5-0 or they lost 5-0, they were still going to be in the exact same position they were today. And the players won't come out and publicly say this. Dan, I'll tell you flat out, I have been in that situation in the Youth World Cup where we qualified after two games. And we went out and got our butts kicked against Spain in the 3rd game of the group, but we knew it didn't matter. If we would have beat them, okay, hey, great. If we lost them, okay, great. We're still in the same spot that we were. Players won't say it, but I guarantee you they were already, the starters at least, their mind's already on Bosnia and Herzegovina on July 1st, because it really didn't matter. It was just an opportunity for those second-team players to maybe make a claim that if the things aren't going well in the knockout round, maybe you can trust me, coach. I just don't think anybody took that opportunity, and I think the coach took it upon himself to make the narrative about him in the post-game, and I think it's a little bit of a stroke of genius from the coach to do that, so it's less about his players, more about him.
Is this? I assume you agree. Maybe I shouldn't speak for you. This is the next game as we get to the knockout. This is a team that the U.S. should indeed beat.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll be interested to see what the lines are in Vegas for it. But when you look at Bosnia and Herzegovina, I think they're ranked like 84th in the world. 64th, excuse me. Look, the game's not played on paper. They had to beat Wales in Italy in a playoff, and they did it in a way in which they tied and then ultimately outlasted their opponents on penalties. So this is a group that will make this game ugly. They have no real desire to try to outplay the United States with soccer. It's not saying they're not capable of putting passages of play together and spells of it. They are. But for the most part, the U.S. are better soccer players. What Bosnia and Herzegovina can do is they can make this game as ugly as possible, make it stop-start, make it to where there's no rhythm, no flow to this game. And if that happens, that's where they can level this match out, and then set pieces can be something that they have an advantage on of the United States. But let's just tell your listeners straightforward here. Then they have to win this game, or it's a failure. It's a failure in the sense of this World Cup was as big of a letdown because the expectations were so high and because the first 2 games went so well. You have to win this game, and there's more pressure than I can remember in quite some time on winning a game like there is in this round of 32.
It's very well said. The next question is the next, I think, obvious one. How far do you think this team can go? Do you view it as you can build something? If you have it going, if you have another really dominant performance, these things can build on themselves. And so that does maybe increase, I guess, or intensify the chances that you can beat a team that on paper is rated higher than you and that is probably overall better than you. How far do you think this thing can go?
Yeah, so there's this great website, BBC.com. It's obviously a huge website over in England, one of the main websites there. But they've come up with, I don't know how you put it, maybe just Google BBC World Cup knockout brackets. And what they've done is they've created an algorithm that basically in real time it starts to show you who's going to play who. While there's still a couple of games left that'll finish out tonight and over the course of the next 2 days, you'll be able to see in real time who the players are, or excuse me, who the teams are that will play in the next round and where they will be. And right now, as I'm sitting there talking to you, I'm going to this website and I'm looking at it, realizing that the United States are locked in to play Bosnia and Herzegovina. They will play the winner of Egypt versus South Korea as it stands now. Then that's 3 teams right there. Any combination of those teams, you should beat Bosnia, and then whoever wins between Egypt and South Korea, you should beat them. So if it stays this way, which it looks like it will if everything goes to plan, now all of a sudden the expectations, and we start to shift the goalpost a little bit, that the U.S. should expect to be winning around a 16 game and getting to the quarterfinals. And then from there, if it shapes out the way it should on the other side of the bracket, then you're playing the number 2 team in the world in Spain. And look, honestly, you're kind of on house money if you get past the round of 16 because I don't think anybody truly expected it. But a quarterfinal would feel really good. Top 8 in the world at home, you start to go, it's another week where you can get more momentum behind you to continue this groundswell that you're already seeing through the first 3 group stages. You just continue that run on for 1, 2, potentially 3 more games and beyond that. But let's call it as it is. We're not lifting the trophy on July 19th. And if we are, I'll show up on this station, my favorite station, and I will tell Chad Abbott, please put me on every show, and I will go on a public apology tour on July 20th saying I couldn't have been more wrong. The U.S. are champions. You have my word with that.
You'll be happy to be wrong at that point. That's for sure.
Happily doing that.
Let me get to a couple of texts. Will you ask him about the money grab of having 32 teams in the knockout round? Pool play was meaningless. No halfway decent team would not make it out of the pools. Was this change in the format a bridge too far for you?
I mean, look, I think that the U.S. should have gotten out of this group comfortably. Should have been challenging to win it. The expanded format from 32 to 48 teams allowed some teams that were lower in the rankings to be able to get an opportunity. But I do think those teams have done well. We're talking about Bosnia, 64th in the world. They're in the tournament. Cabo Verde, I think they were 87th in the world. They tied the number 2 team in the world. And that goalkeeper, the 40-year-old goalkeeper, went from having like 45,000 followers that morning on Instagram when he woke up to, I think, 13 million by the end of the day. It was absolutely wild. There's been crazy stories. But yeah, I think the cream is rising to the top here. And I do think there's going to be very few unexpected teams. You could have probably predicted 30 to 31 of the 32 teams that make it out of the knockout stage comfortably before the tournament. So there's very few surprises, but there's been more good storylines in the group phase. And then the tournament really starts to kick off with round of 32 and then full swing by the round of 16. Then it's everybody's good and anybody can beat anybody really at that point.
Let's finish with maybe a couple of just sort of gut reaction descriptions when I name some of the people, some of the huge names I'm about to name. Let's start with Ronaldo.
Gut reaction is, I think you're seeing a player that is so good, but because he's compared to Messi, when he doesn't keep up with him, we say he's washed. He's still a phenomenal player, but he is just, there's no longer a conversation. He is number 2 in this generation to Messi, but he's still an elite talent, just father times undefeated. It's catching up to him, and you're not seeing what he could do 10 years ago today, unfortunately. What's the Messi,
beyond peak time, et cetera, what distinguishes Messi? You hear that name, you think what?
I think whatever sport you prefer, whoever your favorite player is, Messi is their favorite player. This guy transcends sports. He's an icon. He sees the game in slow motion. He's still doing it at a world-class level, and we're lucky to be able to enjoy watching him in real time and just appreciate it while you can, because Father Time's undefeated for him too, and there'll be a day where we don't get to see it anymore. You are truly witnessing the greatest soccer player of all time.
Wow. It's funny you mentioned the slow motion thing because we have Lou Nanny on every week to talk hockey. And for years, one of the things Louis has talked about is his belief, like a lot of people have, regardless of the sport, that the best of the best, we're talking about the all-timers, it is as if, and I don't know if this is measurable, maybe it is in 2026, that it for their minds, everything does slow, where everything tends to speed up if you're a more average player or maybe a mediocre player at those key moments, that everything somehow, they're able to slow everything down in a way that allows them to see, the field, the pitch, the court, whatever.
I'll try to give you the quickest explanation I can. I used to talk about this with Jason Zucker. We would come on the air all the time, and I loved coming in and being able to just chat with him because we got to have these real conversations while we developed a friendship. I was like, hey, does this happen for you too? Dan, when I played, I could tell you that if I was in a breakaway or a situation where I'm about to go at a defender, I'm going to try to get a shot off and I'm going to try to score. In real time, it probably happened all within 1 second to 2 seconds. But I could tell you the way that I can feel the way my body's leaning. I can read the spin of the ball. Out of the corner of my eye, I'm looking at the defender. And I'm understanding where his hips are or which way he's facing or if his momentum is taking him another way. I can go this way. Now, within all of that time frame of it happening at full speed, then I'm thinking the goalie's there. I can go to the far post. I need to kick it this way. If I do that, there's my teammate over there who could be following up to get a rebound if the goalie saves it. So hit this low and hard to the far post, aiming for just inside. And it sounds crazy, but I've just reeled off about 7 to 8, 9, 10 thoughts, all that probably happened within 1 second, 2 seconds tops. And it's so hard to conceptualize this into a real world application to somebody else maybe who loves the sport you play but just doesn't see it as quickly. I can only imagine if I thought that, and I had a good career. I didn't have a world-class career like Lionel Messi. I can only imagine what his brain operates at. If a Minnesota United NASL player thinks of it this way, what does the greatest of all time look like? Yeah. That might be the one player I would just want to get into his mind for an hour and just see how it operates in a game to understand it, because I think I would be absolutely blown away at the speed in which he can process information and then see it. And I think that ultimately separates everybody, because the reality is, Dan, in sports, for the most part, everybody's about the same size. Everybody's about the same speed. It's who can think quicker and then ultimately execute the plays that they need to in consistent, clean fashion. And he just does it quicker than everybody. And it's not a coincidence that every single soccer player just wants to meet him, wants to say hello, wants to say thank you. He is that much better than everybody. And I can only imagine just the hamster on the wheel spinning around, how fast it's going, processing things far quicker than I could ever imagine.
Great conversation. Good to hear your voice for us for the first time on this show in a while, and we hope we can do it again soon.
Hey, I wanted to say a big thank you to you guys at the Fan. You guys have always been so good to me, Chad Abbott in particular. You guys helped me fall in love with it as I was a player, and then I've been able to have a decade-long career doing this. I watched people like yourself do it, Dan, and of course, obviously, all the guys on the Power Trip, and I just basically stole all the things that the real professionals did, and I've just been doing that for a decade plus now. So thank you for always being so great to me. I will always have a special place in my heart for the Fan, for the platform they gave me and the show we used to have with Nordo back in the day. So thank you for letting me come on, and long may this run continue for the U.S. men's national team. And like I said, go support Minnesota United and Minnesota Aurora. When this is all said and done, you won't regret it. So thanks, Dan, for letting me come on and then wax poetic for about a half hour with you.
It was perfect. It was fun. We'll do it again. Appreciate the kind words. Take care.
Looking forward to it, man.
Thanks, Jamie. Jamie Watson helping us out on, I enjoyed that 30 minutes of soccer conversation and analysis. We have a lot of good reaction coming in, which I will hold on to. I do want to catch up with our old buddy Ben Goessling, who skipped last week for reasons that he will reveal. And we'll get into a little Vikings conversation, because there is some stuff to discuss regarding the ongoing front office shuffle, which I do think should be of interest to Vikings fans, even if you may not know or recognize all of the names.
You're listening to Barrero on The Fan.
From the 1-800-ASK-GARY Traffic Center.
Back on a very busy Friday edition of the Afternoon Aardvark. Lavelle will join in a little less than an hour. Ben Goessling kind enough to join us now via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. Remind folks, I'll admit I ripped you for missing last week, and then I kind of felt bad when it appeared that you were not available for a very selfless reason. But I'll leave it to you to explain. Where you were in Duluth last week, correct?
I was in Duluth last weekend, yes. I was running Grandma's Marathon on Saturday morning, so I was heading up to Duluth to kind of get all the pre-race stuff done last Friday, and then, ran Grandma's Marathon last Saturday morning and ran a personal record of just under a minute. Ended up, I think, finishing in 2 hours, 57 minutes, and I think 22 seconds. So, very fun day up there. The atmosphere up there is great. The weather was better than it had been the last couple of years, and that whole weekend is always a lot of fun. So, very good weekend. And if there's ever a reason to miss, I think that one is as good as any. So, sure. It was a fun weekend up there for sure.
It's interesting because a lot of the reporting lately, Vikings related, has not been related to the quarterback situation or personnel so much as front office issues. And some of these names, the average Rube might not even know, the more casual fan, but I think it is still important stuff for us to address to sort of get a better read on what all of these changes mean to the degree that we can. In some ways, it may be too early to know whether they're working out or not. But let's start and you have a story on this via StarTribune.com on assistant GM Ryan Grigson, who will not return, as you report, to the Vikings in 2026. So why is he gone? Was he asked to leave? Did he want to leave? Was there writing on the wall that there's kind of a new power structure in place? What do we make of that decision?
Yeah, I mean, I think writing on the wall is probably part of it. I mean, he was offered a chance to stay, I think, in a different role, but I think he could see that it's probably not going to be the same thing as it had been, given all of the assistant GM additions that they had made with Trent Kirchner and Andrew Healy. He wasn't going to have the same voice that he has had in the past, and he's a guy that had been a GM in the past, came in with Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, had, I think, a GM interview with the Jets a year or so ago. So I think he felt like, I'm going to try to use my network and try to get out to a place where I may have a little bit larger role in a front office somewhere else than he figured he would have here. I don't know specifically what the role would have been for him here. I do know they offered him that opportunity to stay, and he said, yeah, I'm going to go out and look for something a little bit different. I think the fact that he went through the off season where they were, they put Rob Brzezinski in charge of it. He was obviously here as the assistant GM, has been a GM in the past. And when you're not putting him in charge of it, it probably tells you something about where he stood or where the future was going to be for him. And I think he was probably able to surmise some of those things. And then when he's not a candidate for that job, and then they're bringing in outside people to be the assistant GM, basically have the job that he's had in the past. It doesn't take a lot to say, okay, this is probably going to be a place where my stake in the organization or my status in the organization is going to change a little bit. So I think reading all of those things, he looked at it and said, yeah, there's probably other options for me out there to explore, and that's what he decided to do.
So let me see if I want to make sure I have these straight. So Healy is more the nerd. Kirchner is more the hardcore throwback personnel guy. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd say that's probably a fairly good way to put it. I mean, Healy is an interesting guy in terms of the degrees he has. He's got a couple of, I think he's an Ivy League undergrad and then an MIT graduate degree. So somebody that has been at pretty high levels of analytics, but also gets a lot of praise for the way that he's been able to work with scouts, comes from that Cleveland incubator under Andrew Berry that Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah came from. But I think if the question with Kwesi was always how much can he translate this to the football people, the word on Andrew Healy is that he's done that probably with more success than a lot of people in his shoes, because he's been able to kind of learn how to listen to the scouts and talk about what they want and figure out how to add data to it or even quantify some of the things that they're observing. So I think it's the type of hire that they probably want, but also somebody that has a little more ability to build that cross-functional team, to use some bad business jargon from my Carlson School of Management degree 20-some years ago. I think they get a little more of that from him. He's more of that type of thing. And then Trent Kirchner, I think St. John's grad, a guy from Fulda, Minnesota, hometown of Pat Royce.
That's right.
I think Royce wrote about him right before the Super Bowl. But he comes back home, a guy that had been well respected and very well thought of as a scout and a talent evaluator, had worked with Nolan Teasley for quite a few years in Seattle. So he comes with Teasley from Seattle and comes back home to Minnesota to be the assistant GM here. We
add Ryan Pace, the former Bears general manager, as a quote-unquote advisor. I've almost felt that this is one of the great gigs. If you can rise to the point where you don't really have any responsibility, but we'll still pay you, presumably something, to advise us. So do we have on any of these advisor jobs, because we've had a few of these, I think, like most teams anymore, do we ever get a handle on what the hell they actually do? Is it just security blanket stuff? Is it status? What do these folks tend to do?
I think a lot of it with a guy like that is, somebody that's been through it as a GM. There's a little bit of, hey, when you have a first-time GM, probably some of what Ryan Grigson was doing for Kwesi, where it's, I've been through these things. This is how this part of the job works, or this part of the NFL cycle works. I mean, Nolan Teasley has been around long enough that he doesn't need anybody to explain the NFL calendar to him. But I think just somebody who's been in that GM seat, and he can certainly call John Schneider, and he can call, people that he has worked with around the league, probably Chris Ballard. And I mean, there's enough people that have come out of that Seattle front office that Nolan Teasley will have a network with, that he's not lacking for that. But I think having somebody in your building where you can say, hey, how did you handle this when you were in this spot? What's your read on this type of a situation? I think that level of institutional knowledge is why he's here. I mean, every team looks for those things, and it tends to be why people that were in those jobs find ways to get back into front offices. But sometimes it's probably we did this and it didn't work, and maybe try to think about it a little bit differently. That's probably not a bad resource to have at your disposal either. But I think whether good or bad, and there's certainly probably both of those things with Ryan Pace in Chicago, I think that's a lot of what they're trying to lean on. It's just help me shorten the learning curve maybe a little bit, because you've been through some of these things and you can give me some insight from your own time doing the job.
I don't want to go new sheriff in town on the bit yet to go back into Vikings history, the old Denny Green line when he was first hired to be the head coach. But I have to say that in terms of the moves, the number of moves, where these individuals are coming from, I certainly do get the sense that whether he is trying to make a statement or not, the new guy, Nolan Teasley, is making it clear that there's a new, at least on that side of it, there is a new pecking order, and it's not status quo.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, you see the number of changes in this front office, whether it's people that are replacing existing roles or in cases where they've created new roles. I mean, I think the quantitative methods side of things, I mean, the data analysis side of things has gotten bigger. At least you have people that were in the building that got promoted to larger roles. I think they've built out a little more of the top end of the front office, the top end of the football department in ways that they didn't have before. So I think you do see from all of that he has an idea of the way he wants this to work that might be different than what they've done. And I was interested to see this because there wasn't a ton of that when Kwesi came in, and I think some of it was a little bit of, we have our structure and we want it mostly to stay the same. I mean, he certainly brought in some people that he liked, but in terms of creating new roles or doing this much of a reorganization, especially this quickly, I mean, it's not the thing where you have a new guy that says, well, I'm going to wait a year, I'm going to evaluate people, I'm not going to touch anything, then I'll make the decisions later. He very clearly knew who he wanted to bring in and knew who he wanted with him. So I think the fact that we've seen this level of it this fast tells you that he's gotten a lot more latitude to do some of those things than, perhaps Kwesi had or perhaps other people have had in the past. So, yeah, all of that is very interesting, and how this whole group works together it will be something to continue to chronicle as we go. But the fact that he was kind of able to say, no, I want this structure to look a little bit different than it's been, tells you he's not lacking for ability to shape things the way he wants.
Yeah, I mean, that has to have been negotiated on the front end, right? I have to believe he's not taking the job. He said, well, here's the latitude. I need at least this much latitude. That had to have all been arranged ahead of time, but in of itself is kind of interesting. All right, let's leave it there.
No doubt.
We'll keep it short today, and then we'll probably give you a little time off unless something strange happens, and then before you know it, it'll be training camp time, correct?
Yeah, we are, I think we're 4 weeks out. Man. I think they are like end of July. It's kind of late this year just because the NFL calendar is a little bit late, but yeah, they are, they're back end of July, and then, unless there's any major developments between now and then, it's kind of the quiet time of year. So it'll be here before we know it, but it's time to catch my breath a little bit in more ways than one. But it will be out on the perch relatively soon, I think.
We'll talk soon. Thank you, sir.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Dan.
I appreciate it. That is Ben Goessling, covers the Vikings in the National Football League for the Star Tribune and has contributed to this program for many, many years now. Let's get a short break in here. We'll have a quickie segment before the Top 5 at 5. Lavelle at 5:30. I'm holding on to some good texts as well. Stay tuned.
This is Bumper to Bumper with Dan Barrero on The Fan.
follow-up to our discussion with Ben Goessling regarding the moves that our new general manager has made already since getting here. What makes it, I think, interesting and worthy of conversation like the one we just had is the impression given by a lot of the comments from the Wilfs before the hire was made almost seemed to hint at, we're going to bring a guy in who's going to have that title, general manager, and he's going to leave everything alone. That's going to be part of the agreement. We got our pieces. Our pieces are in place. We got rid of the guy we think we had to. We're going to put Teasley in charge of the draft, and he doesn't need everything else. Everything's good. Everything else is fine. Which scared me. I didn't think that was the way any general manager should come in. But I think what we found out is that this GM had other ideas, and I presume he hasn't run an end run on the Wilfs and done more than they expected, right? I have to think that was worked out, and to that extent, the Wilfs were fine with that and were willing to sign off on what's been adding some people, subtracting some people, obviously. I assume spending some money, but we still don't know how the power is shared between the head coach, the ongoing debate there between the head coach and the general manager moving forward. That's yet to be determined because of the unusual setup here. But just in terms of his side of it, the football operation side of it, scouting, drafting, etc. Teasley may not have said much at his presser, and he didn't, but he's got a little smiling assassin to him.
Yeah.
In that he has clearly come in with a vision, and no one knows if it'll be a good one. It might be a disaster. It might be fine, but I've said all along, I think this team needed to consider the possibility that not everything they did was great, or that if you bring another guy in to be the general manager, you have to let him, take a fresh look. And look, a lot of the moves he's making now, one would assume he hasn't really been around the guys who are in the organization, but I think it's the old, I've got a vision, and I had guys probably lined up that I always thought if I became a general manager, I wanted to be on my team. New GM should always be able to create his own team in that sense. And I have seen a lot more of that than I expected, right? I think it's been far more dramatic in that sense than I thought, which I guess is a cautionary tale to us. We try to interpret comments from the Wilfs or from whoever, and they came off as almost, like I said, just we'll hire you and then just don't upset the apple cart. But he has definitely moved some things around in a very fundamental fashion. So, and again, the encouraging part is he comes from obviously a winning organization and a very good organization to boot. 64686, Bradshaw and Bryant, KFAN text line. Let me get to a couple quick texts, and then we'll prepare for Top 5 at 5 here. We have a number of people who liked our soccer conversation earlier with Jamie Watson. I enjoyed that, too.
Jamie's the best.
651 guy, who is this host? What happened to the 1987 Dan who seethed hatred for the sport of soccer? I've talked about it. We're all allowed to evolve. I will defend my hatred as not being, back then, not being so much a hatred of the sport, but a strong dislike for the pomposity of those who lectured others about the sport. That might have gone
the people.
Yeah, in this case, it would be. Yeah. It would be other the people. It would be the soccer snobs. We have seam heads. Those are the baseball snobs.
Yeah, the ball guys.
Those are the ball guys. I don't know what the right term would be for the subsection in the soccer world.
The sons of pitches.
But that's what it was. It was more that, and then you decide, okay, how can you get them? Well, you tweak this. You end up savaging the sport more than it's worth being savaged, right? But I will again say, I'm not going to pretend that we're going to be turning into a show that devotes hours and hours each week, year round to soccer.
Right.
Right.
We're not taking the light rail to United
Which doesn't
games.
mean we hate it, but it's still not going to be. It's not going to be our bread and butter by any means. But World Cup time, we've said I think the last couple, and we keep ramping it up with each succeeding World Cup. So we're going to try to get into this thing, and we're going to get into this thing more. And that I feel like I got all the venom out of me for that. I still think legitimate reason. The soccer snobs, the sons of the pitches, as you call them, they know who they are. The old, if you can't understand just how it's like a baseball team has the nuances of this, how complicated. Oh, it's complicated. I feel like I got that out of my system. Now, what we're trying to concentrate on are the games, the stories, the big knockers. And at the top of the list so far, and that's a big part of it, is the U.S. success. And I give Jamie credit. He did not mince words. The odd position they're in is the U.S. And, it's the danger of getting a little better is then expectations rise.
Yep.
But some of this is you're not playing a team that's very good next round, Bosnia, Herzegovina.
It's their second World Cup.
Exactly. So when he said, as he did earlier, hey, if the U.S. doesn't win that game, this becomes a failure. That's the kind of commentary I'm looking for. And in the soccer snob world, that too was not allowed. That was also part of the problem. No. You got to support this whole enterprise. No, you have to evaluate it. You'd like to think the same way, hold the teams to the same standards that you do other teams too in other more conventional U.S. sports. But I loved our conversation with him. I hope we can do it again. And I think Guardsy and I are on board on some of the stories we've talked about regarding other teams. Witch Doctor guy earlier today. It's good material. And any place where we can get good material, we will gladly gravitate in that direction. In fact, what kind of material do we have for today's Top 5?
A Caitlin Clark update and a Dylan Larkin update.
You're listening to Barrero on The Fan.
From the 1-800 Ask Gary Traffic Center.